Welcome to the NEPA Scene Podcast. This is episode 52. We're coming to you from the Stewed at 258 Studios in Scranton. I'm Rich Howells. I'm the founder and editor of NEPA Scene.
I'm Mark. I run 258.
And we have no Lauren this week.
No.
But we do have some really great guests with us. We have two representatives from Friends of Lackawanna, if you want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Michele Dempsey.
Hi, I'm Pat Clark.
See, that wasn't hard, was it?
That was a pretty short introduction.
No. And what do you do, Michele?
What do I do? Good question.
And what do you do, Pat? Your shirt's tucked in, so it must be serious day.
Work time. I do podcasts in my spare time.
Have you both done podcasts before?
I listen to them, but I've never done one.
Oh, okay.
Do you have an iPhone?
I do.
All right, then you can get this easy.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about what it is that you guys do. I guess this is now starting to become kind of a profession.
That's true.
It's become a movement, that's for sure.
So why don't you, man, there's no easy way to get into it. So just tell me what's Friends of Lackawanna all about.
So much to tell. It's true. It's been a long time now. Friends of Lackawanna was started as a group of people who came together in opposition of the expansion of the Keystone Sanitary Landfill. That's at its base how it started. But it's definitely the membership has grown from there, and our sort of day to day has grown from there, and it's we're really committed to making to protecting this area environmentally, specifically from that expansion.
But what was like the impetus of it? What was it like? Do you remember like the day where it was like, whoa.
Yeah. So
something seems amiss here.
Yeah, I got my mom, I think everybody's moms forward them articles half the time. You just delete, or get to that later.
Yeah. What moms go through.
Another kind of crazy joke or whatever, or something political that you don't agree with.
Right.
That's normally what I got from my mom.
Yeah.
Right? But this particular day, it was an article in the Times Tribune about, it was called Piling It On. And it was talking about the Keystone Sanitary Landfill and how they were applying for a 50-year permit. And I just remember blood rushing to my face and being like, what? I grew up in Swinnick's neighborhood. And I guess the landfill's been there for a long time. But you didn't really know it was there when I was growing up because it was actually a landfill. It was going in the ground and you sort of didn't know it was there.
Michele is kinder than I in a lot of ways. The name in and of itself needs to be adjusted.
Yeah.
The Keystone Sanitary Landfill. There's
Right.
nothing sanitary about it, and there's nothing landfilling about it either.
No.
It's building a mountain. So then go ahead.
I'm building a mountain of trash that is not sanitary at all.
So, okay. So,
Right. Yeah.
Mark, I'll throw you off.
we'll get to that, Pat.
Yeah.
Well, you're a lawyer. That's what you do.
Yeah. And then I just noticed, I think in the past 10 years or so, I started on my way to, I don't live in Swinnick's anymore. I live up at Music Lakes. And on my way up, I started to see this
Commotion.
stuff happening. And then all of a sudden I started to smell, it started to smell bad. And I knew it was then I knew it was a landfill, right? And it went from this kind of small hill to this bigger hill, and then one day I turned around, it was a mountain, right? And I just thought, the smell got so bad I could smell it 3 miles away at the lake. And we started to get seagulls landing on our lake, as we still do, just completely coating the lake.
Seagulls.
They're actually not seagulls, they're gulls, but they're very notable in so much as they are scavenger birds that spend the day picking at the landfill and then come and roost on our water.
But where do they come from? They're not. Were they here 20 years ago?
No, I mean we've been at the lake our entire lives. The summer.
Was this an X-Men thing? Where did these? In other words, if 20 years ago there was no grizzly bears in my backyard,
right?
And all of a sudden there's grizzly bears,
right?
And I live in Manhattan,
right?
Should I ask a question?
Right. You might want to say what's
what's happening?
Those grizzly bears.
Okay.
So clearly these scavenger birds are attracted by the massive amounts of garbage in the open face of the landfill every day, or at least during the times of year that they're around. And so I thought, well, this is horrible. I can smell this at my home, and these birds are landing on my lake. And I knew that there were a few years left on the, like maybe 5 years. It was a 10-year permit. And I'm like, just
Tough it out, right?
Tough it out. And then it'll be over. They'll cap it. It'll be done. And then I read this article about 50 years. And I couldn't even believe it. And they were talking about a train, like having a train bring garbage from New York and New Jersey. And they were talking about, everything about it was like horrifying. And I couldn't help myself. I started to talk to anybody who would listen to me. Is anybody else as horrified as I am about this? And then I found Catherine Mackerel Oven, right? And she was just, my sister heard me talking about it and then heard her talking about it and then put us together. And that was sort of the beginning of Friends of Lackawanna.
Yeah, but like what month, year was this article?
May 2014. It was April, actually, 2014.
And then you and Catherine got together.
About May of 2014.
So within like a couple weeks.
Well, within like a month or so. Yeah. And then we started going to Dunmore Council meetings. And that's where really Friends of Lackawanna started to coalesce. And that's where I met Pat and his wife and a lot of other members of Friends of Lackawanna who cared very much about what was happening. And that's where it all started.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't live in the area, I mean, to give you a perspective, I mean, to look at it, you would actually think that it is a mountain. It is really that high from a distance because we're in a valley surrounded by mountains, and you just see this big peak here, and you can't imagine that that's actually trash. Now, Pennsylvania has so much trash from New York, New Jersey, everywhere else coming in here, right?
That's right. About 60%, Pat. 60% of the landfill garbage is from out of state.
Yeah, Keystone specifically about 60%, and Pennsylvania imports more trash than any other state in the country.
Wait.
Yeah.
So it's 50 nifty United States.
We import more trash than anyone in the United States.
Than any other state in the United States.
And it's not close.
We are America's garbage can.
So just to give perspective, if like Pennsylvania is 100, what's the next closest state that takes trash?
I believe Virginia is, and I don't know what percentage is it, but it's not very close.
Not even comparative to what we do.
No.
Okay.
And in the state, we're the third largest landfill.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, right? The average person produces about 4 pounds of garbage a day, 4.5 pounds of garbage a day.
Right.
The Keystone landfill takes in about 15 million pounds of garbage a day, 6 days a week.
What?
15 million pounds of garbage a day.
It's almost inconceivable.
It's almost I'm sitting here going like
you try to wrap your head around those numbers.
You can't. And when you look,
it's like comparing a gobstopper to a nuclear weapon.
Yeah,
it's just like
it's almost incomprehensible. And when you look back at that landfill from Dixon City and the amount of acreage it takes up, that big bald spot, it actually is like a cancer growth on the side of the mountain, right? And it's as big as the entire township next to it. And it's so big, and we forget because we see it every day. I mean, unfortunately, we've just become used to it.
Yeah.
Like, that's sad. But we work with an environmental activist, a famous environmental activist. Her name is Lois Gibbs, and she was a key leader in the Love Canal, issue, which we'll get into later. But she came to this area recently, and she was like, her mind was blown. She said it was the largest landfill she's ever seen. Ever in her 37 years.
Now, real quick.
And ours is right next to a community. Ours is in the middle of a thriving residential community.
So how close was Love Canal to her community?
They were built on top of it. Love Canal was built on top of a toxic waste dump.
Wait, so they isn't that the plot for Poltergeist, basically? Yeah. You move the headstones, but not the graves. So Love Canal was literally built on top of a toxic landfill.
Yeah. And very much, like what we find, people were telling them, oh, the sicknesses have nothing to do with that. Yeah, your kids are getting epilepsy. Your kids are, your kids are, their IQs are being hurt. Some of them are dying. But actually, one of the women who came to an event we had recently, her child passed away in Love Canal, and everybody was being told it had nothing to do with the toxic waste dump that the community was built on top of.
I mean, everybody meaning
like all the state officials and the elected
regulatory
agencies, and even the people were like, not these regulatory agencies are here to protect us. So nobody would actually believe that they'd build a school or community on top of a toxic waste dump, right? But they did, and she ended up through her efforts and many other people coming together in her community. President Carter actually moved 873 families out of Love Canal.
So, do you have a?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm just looking up something.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, I thought
I
you
actually
wanted to jump in.
kind of prepared for this.
Well, what I think is interesting is you said it started out just as a few people, and me and Mark were at the event last week, and you filled a ballroom full of people at the Radisson. So
No, they filled the ballroom, and then they had to expand.
Exactly.
You guys
farther.
are doing your own expansion.
It's a much better kind.
Yeah.
So they had to add 200 more seats.
Yeah, I just saw seats coming in constantly.
Yeah, we planned on about 200, and there were over 400 that showed up.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is growing to a legitimate movement now.
Yes.
It's not just I think a lot of people having covered city council, county commissioners for many years, I would see people come in and it was like one or two guys who said they represent the whole area, and they really didn't. They were just some guy who wanted to spout off and see himself on local TV or something like that. This is not only a real impactful issue that affects us all, but now it's getting to the point where there are more and more people speaking out about this. This isn't something where it's just you guys. Now there's much beyond that.
I want to eventually get to the point where what the impact is, or the potential impact.
It's really scary.
I don't want to be the guy who's like the crazy guy who's like, Obama's going to take away your guns.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that.
No.
I don't want to give that illusion.
Mark,
Sure.
It's terrifying.
But you did a pamphlet.
Yeah.
And the pamphlet has certain global landmarks on it to give perspective.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you know how to use AutoCAD. Okay, right?
What?
Right?
Yeah, I forget I had a day job. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So this might be a dumb question, but
No,
when
no
you
dumb
did the perspective, is it to scale?
Oh, it's to scale. There's one I did looking back from Dixon City, and I spent a lot of time on that one just because I knew it could come under fire. To the best of my knowledge, it is. Yeah.
So you have the Eiffel Tower.
Because I took that section is definitely to scale. And there's a 3D looking back from Dixon City that I worked off all the drawings that the DEP had, all the engineering drawings. And yeah, it's going to be over. If you look at the Statue of Liberty and you put another Statue of Liberty on top of it, it's even taller. It's so tall, to put it in perspective, because sometimes it's hard. It's so tall, it's like it's going to need lights to warn planes. That's how tall it's going to be.
All right, now when you started,
it's going to be taller than almost every other mountain in our area.
The ones that God made.
The ones that God made. Yeah, our garbage mountain will be as tall, if not taller, than almost every mountain range around it.
All right, so
and it'll certainly look taller from the valley, from inside the valley.
So, but you're an architect / engineer?
Architect.
Okay, but you deal with engineers because you know that I come from a construction background and my
Yes.
family owns a steel business.
Yep.
I can read blueprints. I can understand scale and all that stuff. When you went out there and started doing that, did it hit home more when you actually went, oh, there's the Eiffel Tower comparatively?
Yeah, it's everything we do, every layer of the onion we peel back is more terrifying. The more we dig, the more we scrape, the more we research. It just I wish I could set off alarm bells. I wish I could run around the British are coming. I wish I could just be knocking and just shaking people. Do you have any idea how bad this is? Do you have any idea how awful this is for our community? And why are we putting ourselves at this risk? Why are we putting our homes and our families and our health at this risk for what? What are we getting out of this?
So let's get to that too. But when you guys started organizing and you met Pat, and then obviously when groups start, they start. People start. You start. Okay, your strong point is that. Your strong point is that. Your strong point is that. You guys started filing right to know requests and freedom of information stuff, correct?
Yes.
How hard was that
to get the information.
To get the information. I mean, because usually people think like, you just file, you Google it.
Yeah, sometimes it's been challenging to get. In most cases, we've gotten a lot of the information we're seeking. The Scranton Times had a reporter, Brendan Gibbons, who was an environmental reporter. He's recently moved out of the area. He had done an enormous amount of heavy lifting in terms of getting right to know requests and documents. His background is in environmental training. He got a ton of the stuff. We got some of that stuff as well, and then we followed up on our own as well.
So when you started getting those in, like, because the moment you file a right to know request, it becomes public, right?
Well, you can choose to make it public. Yeah, we can only.
So is that what Brendan did?
Yeah, he had gotten the public documents from DEP and all the reports they had collected over time up at Keystone, and then he'd used that, and done a lot of analysis on it to write a lot of stories on the issue as well.
So when the group sits down and looks at that, and like you said, peeling back the onion, what is the consensus of the group as you keep peeling it back? Because not only is it just you guys, I mean, there's homeowners, residents.
Well, the first thing is the nuisance, right? So the first thing you sort of struck by is like the smells, and like Lois Gibbs said, like, I bought this beautiful home and I can't open my windows, right? So,
well, one of the striking things that she said to me, that a smell is toxic.
Yeah. Well, why do you think it smells bad? Right?
That's the thing, and I heard somebody say quite a few years ago that if every resident, and this is not like to denigrate the town, it's just kind of like Scranton's kind of used to use a term loosely, getting shit on.
Yeah.
So if everybody woke up tomorrow morning and the streets were lined in horse shit, they'd buy taller cowboy boots. and I think our generation is trying to change that paradigm to be like, let's clean it up or not have the horses be there.
Yeah. The phrase that makes my skin crawl is, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
That just makes me want to scream. Because nothing changes if nothing changes, if you don't try.
I think there's two, and one of the things Michele and I've joked about over time is there's the science of it is debated, but a lot of times people say, if you put a frog into a pot of boiling water, it'll jump out immediately.
Yeah.
Because it realizes the water's boiling, right? If you put a frog into a pot of lukewarm water, put it on the stove and
raise the temperature,
water, the frog will boil to death. Right. And the parable behind it is things that change slowly over time don't get noticed, and you're willing to accept it to your ultimate demise. And this landfill is probably a good example of that, right? Mm-hmm. It just keeps taking in 14, 15 million pounds of garbage a day, every day for decades and decades and decades. And all of a sudden it's too late. You just mentioned something like when the group started organizing. Have you guys seen the movie, The Big Short?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. Where that guy, he's considered crazy, and he's like, he sees this and he's certain as hell that he's right. And he looks at it and he's like, why doesn't everyone see this yet?
Is this the Christian Bale character?
Yeah. He sees it and he's like, this is going to crash and cause terrible results. Why isn't everyone, and everyone thinks he's crazy, right? You're like, and you're watching it. And then ultimately what happens, right? He was right because he had the facts and he had the data and he had the common sense to say, okay, this is different. Something's wrong here. And then he was correct, right? Unfortunately for millions of people. It's kind of similar, right? When we started, people were saying, yeah, we admire that's, way to stick up for things. You're crazy though, right? And now you fill a ballroom sold out with a federal senator, a state senator, and perhaps the most famous environmental activist of our generation. That shifted. The momentum has certainly changed, and the perception as well.
We spend most of our podcast with Rich and I going like, you. Yeah. We're constantly holding the door open for each other.
We're so polite.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that adage, if you can't see it, I don't know how the adage goes, but if you can't see something, it's like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's also used to appease children with monsters.
Right.
Michele, I'll help you out here. Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight. Thank you. That's the one. That's the one. Much better with analogies, Pat.
Well, he's a lawyer.
So yeah. Right. But again, it's like, so in the beginning it was like, I can smell it, the birds, I can see it now, our reputation. It's been proven if you live near a landfill, especially a mega landfill, which is like takes 500 tons a day, and this takes up to 7,200.
Is that considered a mega landfill? Like
500 tons a day.
Wait, they even have categories for landfills. Yeah. This is considered a mega landfill.
Mega landfill. It blows mega away. Yeah. Like mega is just, there needs to be a new category for this one. And that's nationwide? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
So if you live near a mega landfill, which is 500 tons a day, again, we're up to like 7,250, your home value drops by 14%. All right. So 13%. So just think of, take your home, whatever the value of the home is you live in, if you're within a mile of landfill and
Within a mile.
Yeah.
Most of these homes are within a quarter mile, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it keeps going out too. So to Michele's point, that this guy that did this study, he's a professor, and he studied the impact of landfills on economies and specifically on property values. So we're not a shy group. We reached out to him right away and said, hey, here's what's going on. What do you think? And he wrote an opinion letter for us and said, no, absolutely. It's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's with 99.8% certainty that these facts that, they do all these studies across the country in terms of what landfills are impacted. And I think the number is with 99.8% certainty, here's the impact it has. And the farther away you go, the lesser the impact. But this thing is in the middle of the densest community of any community in Pennsylvania that hosts landfills. So the number of houses that are going to be impacted is more as well. And
as Lois said, how dare they? How dare they take away the value of your home you worked so hard for and a lot of people rely on? It's their biggest investment. Sometimes it's their retirement. And now it's worth 14% less. So you're worried about paying a little more in garbage fees? How much does that cost?
Oh, you know what? This is one of the famous arguments we get too. The dump was there before these houses were built. Okay. That was true in some cases and not true in others, right? There was a housing development before the dump started. But once the dump was there, people say, well, it was there. You should have known that. Why'd you move into Dunmore? The dump was there. Well,
is that to say that no one should move into Dunmore?
Right. Well, it's a crazy argument.
They
but
won't.
Then if
Trust me.
Yeah, it's not too far away if this thing goes through. The sad part is if you say you moved next to a neighbor and they want to put an addition on their house, would you be okay with them building a 100-foot skyscraper next to your house? No, it's all relative, right? This thing is not an expansion of 3 feet. They want to go 220 feet higher than what they are right now.
Yeah.
It's not like this thing is minor. The property is 750 acres. This isn't like a needle. I mean, it's until you go there, until you look at some maps, some Google images or Google Earth. I encourage anyone to do it.
Have you been there?
Yes.
Oh yeah, we had hot dogs up there.
No, we did not eat the hot dogs.
Radioactive hot dogs.
I mean, full disclosure, I did go up there.
Yeah, we did too.
Over the summer, and just to give people perspective, I've been following your. And trust me, I don't know if people really realize this, but you guys are literally, I said it the other day, I said it's like David fighting 10 Goliaths. But until you get in the middle of up there, you have no idea how big it is.
It's it really is mind blowing. And
if I was trying to kill somebody and I shot a bullet from one side of the landfill to the other, I could probably watch an episode of something on Netflix before it hits them.
Yes.
That's how big.
Well, they had the tours, right? And just the fact that you get on a school bus and they say this tour is going to take between 45 minutes or an hour to drive around the facility.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
That's
you can
crazy.
get from here to where? Past Allentown in an hour.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you drive around a school bus for an hour and get to see everyone's garbage. Okay.
And, and that's, so what I learned when I went up there, and it speaks to, okay, so the initial things that annoy people were the smells and the birds and the look of it and the reputation. But then we started doing really, again, peeling back the onion and finding things out, and as soon as you scratch the surface, it is crazy. So the first thing that Brendan Gibbons reported was that for 12 years, leachate, raw leachate has been leaking into our groundwater.
So for people who don't know what leachate is, and we were talking before the show about in the 80s when we had to boil water because of this problem.
Yeah.
What is leachate?
It's essentially garbage juice. So when it rains, the
but it's
water,
compacted and compressed.
Well, so it rains and the water moves through the landfill, kind of picking up all kinds of horrible things along the way, including the fracking stuff, which is new, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But so it picks up everything horrible as it moves through, and this thick, black liquid, then, is collected because now it's lined, so it's collected in pipes and then taken to lagoons. And then from the lagoons, it goes through a pretreatment plant on the site, and then it gets sent to the sewer authority. Okay. So
and the sewer authority is located how many miles from the landfill?
It's in South Scranton, so I don't know.
3 or 4 miles.
Yeah, something like that.
Through underneath neighborhoods.
3 or 4 miles of pipes.
Yeah. So
underneath neighborhoods.
But here's the thing: the pipe back in 1990, there was an agreement. People in the
25 years ago.
Yeah, 25 years ago. When the landfill reopened as a sanitary landfill,
Wait. Why were they closed?
Oh, they were closed because because
What year was this that they were closed?
Late 80s. They were
87.
closed for 87 for violations. They had so many violations they got closed down, and then they reopened as a sanitary landfill, and they had with the liners and the pretreatment plant and everything. But just to finish up on the leachate thing, so 12 years the leachate's been going into our water, and for 12 years, the Department of Environmental Protection, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, which we call the DEP, never issued a violation and never told the public, which they are required to do.
Now, when you say leaching into our water, what is that? Into our sewers, into our
groundwater. So
into what?
Yeah, our groundwater. So our groundwater.
Wait, bypassing the pipe.
No pipe, just going right into our groundwater, raw, just awful. You know how precious our groundwater is, and our soil. Just going right into it.
Now, for the people listening in Waverly, you have well water. Imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to be downhill. That's all I'm saying. So
wait, for 12 years.
Now 13, because it's still leaking, right? So then what I learned at the landfill that day that we went up is that in a sanitary landfill that has a liner, I thought like these liners had to be every so many feet, that they would have these plastic liners. And I don't know, I just had this like sort of opinion of in my head of what it would be. The liner is only at the bottom, right? It's like, it's a little thicker. It's maybe, like a thick fingernail. Like it's not that.
Oh, really?
It's not that thick. And it's like a few millimeters thick. And
wait, almost like a pool liner.
Kind of. I've never seen a, but it's not. It's really it's like that. It's only a few millimeters thick, and I was and I asked the engineers there. I'm like, this is it. This is what's at the bottom. Yeah. So, okay, what at the bottom of the 700 and some feet that this will be when it's all said and done? Yeah. So what happens if there's a hole? Right? Because it doesn't look like it's hard to puncture this thing. Right? It just doesn't look hard. I'm like, how would you fix it? How would you know where it was and how would you fix it? No, they weren't really clear how you'd figure out where it is, but there are ways to kind of at least get in a general zone. Like you can understand from some of the
Does that mean you have to dig down 250 feet?
700 and some feet by the time it's done.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's going to be over 700 feet high from the base of the landfill to the top of it.
So almost 2.5 football fields they have to drill.
Yeah, they would have to dig it out to get down to the liner to find.
And maybe that's where it is.
And so, so as one of our guests said the other night, what he knows for sure is eventually every landfill leaks. And this one is leaking now, right? Even in the line portions. So, not only is it going into our water where it's unlined, but we believe it's going into our water where it's lined. And then this leachate, getting back to that. So where does it go from here? So first of all, our groundwater is being contaminated, has been for 13 years. The only reason that it came out was because of Brendan's reporting. And now the leachate.
So he filed a right to know for that.
I think he looked at some data. I mean, it's in the data. I think he collected the data on.
Right.
But the leachate itself is supposed to go through, it's called a dedicated line. Okay. So it's a line dedicated solely to leachate. That's it. That's all that runs through it. It's not connected to anything else. Like it doesn't connect to any homes or any businesses. It's like a dedicated line for leachate that would bring it to the sewer authority.
One line that has no other inputs.
Right. Along it.
Just that one line from the landfill down to the sewer authority.
Until it gets to a trunk line and then the sewer authority.
Okay.
Because back in after they reopened as a sanitary landfill, they needed to figure out what to do with their leachate. And the landfill and the sewer authority said, we'll take it. Right. And then the people of Greenridge said, wait a minute. And the city said, no, we don't want to take it. So long story short, there was a settlement agreement because the line that runs through the other line, there's another line that comes from there, runs through Greenridge. It's a combined sewer overflow line, right? And what that means is it connects to people's homes, it connects to businesses, and in a big storm event, it can go right directly into the river, into the Lackawanna River. So it's not dedicated, so to speak. So if it backs up, you're getting leachate in your home, if that makes sense. So they they said, we don't want that risk. So we don't want the leachate running down here. And so there was a binding settlement agreement in 1990 that said, that from now on you use this dedicated line. And you're not allowed to use this one anymore.
And that line runs where?
It runs.
So it's like a secondary line just in case.
Yeah.
That's what they were trying to propose it as.
Well, it's not a second. According to the most recent permit, it's not even an emergency line. The only line they're allowed to use is the dedicated line. Yeah. And so, they're never supposed to use that. But then, there was a horrible smell incident in September of 2015.
Right.
There was like the odor so bad that the medically fragile residents of St. Joe's had to be evacuated. That's how bad the smell was.
Wow.
Sleep Inn and Dunmore had to be evacuated.
Hotel.
Hotel. People who live on or near this line were just could hardly be in their homes.
And this line runs from the landfill to where?
From the landfill down Monaghan Avenue. It's
through the cemetery.
Through the cemetery.
Through the Dunmore Cemetery?
Right.
Yeah. And then
down through Greenridge.
Yeah, down through Greenridge, and then along the river to the
down past Greenridge Corners, down towards the plot.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it possibly empties into the plot.
Well, no, then it goes to the sewer authority. But
so wait, that seems like a scenic route to get to the sewer authority.
It's pretty scenic, yeah. But the thing is, it's all gravity. So the entire way it's downhill, the dedicated line needs to be pumped. So you have to pay to pump it. Just something you should note. So it'd definitely be cheaper to send it down the gravity-fed line.
Yeah.
Right? And so anyway, that after that smell incident, a lot of questions were raised, especially by Friends of Lackawanna. Long story short, in December of 2017, the sewer authority changed a permit midstream, like in the middle of the permit, and said, "Oh, we're just, it's a little confusing. We should have had this other sewer line in here." And so they added the sewer line that goes through Greenridge to the permit, and they said it was a typographical error. So they added completely added another line.
I.e. they didn't do spell check.
right. Like
which is basically what that says. A typographical error is like, we didn't put in an apostrophe.
Yeah. It's like they pretended that the settlement agreement never happened. So we're in the middle of raising awareness in Greenridge about this, because what that means right now is that leachate from the landfill can run carte blanche down that line.
Unrestricted.
It is another outfall. It doesn't say in an emergency. It doesn't say only under certain special conditions. It lists 2 lines that can be used at any time. And that's one of them.
So we're talking, homes, businesses, parks, schools, any stuff like that.
Anything connected to that line, if it backed up,
wow,
leachate could back up too.
Into your homes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of kids, especially in Greenridge, a lot of families, a lot of their kids play in the basement.
Right.
They have a furnished basement or whatever. So that means, and you got to have, things in place in case, like, every now and again there's a flood.
Wow.
My neighbor next door in West Side, if the water comes in, he has a pump.
Yeah.
That is coming into their homes, which could possibly be the actual liquid.
Could possibly be.
And it's definitely the smell.
Well, we've had anecdotal reports about people smelling. They know in Greenridge, they know what leachate smells like.
Yeah. Especially longtime residents there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we've just had reports that they've smelled it for decades. And so, because nobody knows, we've asked over and over, how would you ever know when the landfill is using that line? And when and how much? And we never get an answer. And actually, the night of that solvent incident, they admitted that they were using that line.
But now they
said the pumps were broken, and so the pumps to use the dedicated line, because it goes uphill.
Yeah.
They said the pumps were broken, so they were using that line, and then they backtracked on that later.
So all right, so
it was a miscommunication.
As a legal professional, Pat, to go change a permit like that, can like me? Like if I work down there, can I just walk in, just change the wording of it and be like, all right, that's good? Or is there supposed to be a protocol?
I suspect that wouldn't fly. No, I think there's 2 issues involved. The first is how and what are the procedures around changing permits, right? And that's what they did unilaterally. The second part, which is probably more of the legal issue, is how can you unilaterally change a settlement agreement without the parties agreeing to it, right?
Without the parties agreeing to
Right.
it.
So this is where they said, okay, now this is allowed. There was a settlement agreement for a reason the first time, and there were parties involved with that. The city was one of the parties. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right. So the city is one of the parties. The city
of Scranton.
Right.
Yeah.
And the city of Scranton wasn't involved in this revised settlement, this revised permit.
I mean, don't you think they would get the people together who are part of the settlement and say, hey, look,
Right. That's theoretically what should happen legally. So what Michele has been leading the charge on is just making sure that, Scranton City Council and people in the city know, like, hey, here's what's going on. Because this isn't, this is just another example. We keep talking about pulling things back. The more you look, the more you find. There's sadly some apathy now. It's just like you said, sometimes people just feel like they're getting shit on continuously. At some point, people, I don't want to say give up, but you kind of roll your eyes and say, oh, it's par for the course. And I think that's part of what we're trying to help show, that it doesn't have to be that way. Let's look at this thing actually.
But the fixing of this is not a sprint; it's a marathon. To make a difference, you have to really be engaged.
Yeah, we started. I think, right, like Michele said, the summer of 14. Right, we're in 16 now, 2016. We've been at this for over a year and a half already. We're probably looking at least another year.
Do either one of you have a day off from thinking about this landfill?
No. If we're being honest. No.
You can't. No, it's too engrossing.
All right, so let me ask. Do you have a question before?
Well, you had mentioned the fracking chemicals in the leachate.
Yeah.
Now, the fracking, of course, has been a big issue around the state and everything. And do people even understand that stuff is being put right in that dump there, and that it could theoretically be in their water?
And what is it? To be specific,
It's a good question.
I'll start with what they can take.
Right.
I don't think the state even
And what's in
knows
that
what it
truck?
actually
Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
know.
Right.
It's
So that landfill is
the blood of Batman's villains. We don't.
That landfill is allowed to take up to 2,500 tons of drill cuttings.
2,500 tons.
Right, a day.
Tons.
So how many thousands of pounds in that is that?
Times 2,000. So 2,500 times 2,000.
So it's 50 or 60.
It's a
No,
lot.
wait,
you're
500.
off by zero. Yeah, so it's roughly
So
a
it's
third.
500,000.
No, 5 million. So they can
5 million?
Yeah, because they can take roughly 7,500 tons a day, and that's about 15 million pounds. It is 15 million pounds, and 2,500 is about a third, so they can take 5 million pounds of drill cuttings a day.
Now that's the stuff. Now drill cuttings is when they drill down, they use the frack fluid, they use water, they use salts, they use some sort, and every now and again there's a little bit of irradiated.
Right. So there's radiation naturally occurs in this rock that far down.
Right.
So they bring those drill cuttings. When everything comes back up, they bring those drill cuttings to be. I don't know how they treat it.
And anyone who's a carpenter knows that if you drill into the wall, when you come out, the wood's going to come out of the wall. What do you do with the wood?
Yeah, they put it in the landfill.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And
So now
it's radioactive. There's that. They need monitors around the landfill when the trucks come in.
Radioactive monitors.
Yeah. And
basically Geiger counters.
Every truck that comes in with the fracking, the drill cuttings has to go through a radioactive sensor to determine how much radioactivity is in that specific.
But it's not
batch.
zero.
No, it's not zero. There's a threshold by which it can't exceed, or the alarm bells go off. One of our points has always been, okay, what is the cumulative aggregate impact of that over decades? And unfortunately, you can't answer it because it's never been done before. So then they get the approval after that. Now I think they can use the fracking, the drill cuttings as ground cover, right?
Yep.
So
what is that? What?
So after you stack garbage all day, right? You get to cover it up each night. So now you can put the drill cuttings.
Because you have to put dirt, right?
Yeah, on top of that. So you can put drill cuttings on top of it now.
So wait, now they're covering the top layer of garbage, which was supposed to be some sort of like a modified or...
Yeah, I think they just also got another permit to allow crushed glass.
Glass, yep.
As a cover?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I ain't walking on that.
Right.
The irony, right, of when a recycling community, we're trying to get more recycling to use.
Wait a second. Wait. Doesn't Dunmore recycle?
Yeah. It's not just
Where's the
Dunmore.
glass coming from?
No idea.
Cars? I don't know.
So literally like people's like bottles of Fanta are now used as covering?
It says crushed glass. I'm not sure.
It says crushed glass.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Well, how much glass are we making that we can have enough for a layer?
I don't know.
It's a lot of glass.
You can't. You'll never get to the bottom of all these calculations. It's because the scope of it and the magnitude is so high and so great.
Well, yeah, there's so much coming in every single day. There's no way to be able to regulate that.
No, and
Well, it's like immigrants.
Easy.
When we ask
All
over
right,
and
Trump.
over, what's in this? What's and nobody knows. So how can you tell us it's not hurting us when you don't even know what's in all this fracking fluid and sludge and and drill cuttings?
Right.
You don't know. But
Well,
we do
they're
know.
proprietary chemicals that they can't
Yeah,
say because
right.
of what's the term? It's intellectual property of the
Yeah,
company.
They call it the Halliburton loophole or something like that.
Yeah.
Ah.
But we do know it's getting into our groundwater. So I hope they're, I hope it's not. Well, no, we know it's horrible. Like, it's just horrible stuff.
Doesn't the DEP or somebody have some sort of health studies and things and how this is affecting people's health?
Okay, so now we're going to go into the black hole. So
Get Stephen Hawking here immediately.
we're into the weeds already. So for listeners, if you can take one thing away so far, this whole process defies common sense.
Completely.
Everything we've talked about, we're already way in the weeds, right? So go read up on some background if you'd like some more details. But
Or visit friendsoflackawanna.com.
yeah, go to friendslackawanna.org, .org, and our Facebook page. Search Friends Lackawanna. So, right, good question. The DEP is in place to protect the health of the citizens of Pennsylvania. So when we started digging, we said, okay, great. Let's review the data of the health data and the environmental data that you've collected of the areas immediately surrounding and most impacted by this landfill. So that would be in Dunmore and Throop, right? Because the landfill's in Dunmore and Throop. And they've never done a single health study or collected any offsite environmental data to analyze. Ever. So the records there's no records. So
Do they do any on-site data?
yeah, they have that's where a lot of these articles stem from, right? They collect some data on site in terms of, water samples, and there's, if you go up to the landfill and take the tour, there's some water wells that you'll sample and stuff like that. So there's some on-site stuff which indicate problems, but there's nothing off-site. Unfortunately, water and gas and air, they don't know that the boundary of the landfill stops at a certain point, right? They just find its own level. They'll just go anywhere. So we started looking for some data, and there is no data at all to look at, which is mind-blowing. So if the whole point of this thing is you're saying it's safe, don't worry about it, you cannot factually or logically tell anyone it's safe if you don't have any data. So the line that we've been beating to death is, in a world where data is king, we have none. And that is crazy. That in and of itself is the reason to stop this thing right now.
Yeah.
Why isn't ongoing health and environmental data collection part of the process?
And why isn't it being done in Swinnock?
Right. Not only is it not part of the process, not only is it not being done in Swinnock, when you look at the regulations right now, they'll tell you they don't even need to accommodate that, which is crazy.
And they're using, what's their justification for being like, well, we don't have to do that?
So we went to DEP for this data. There's no data. We then said, okay, let's go to Department of Health. There's no data. The Department of Health was not going to do anything unless Friends of Lackawanna said, let's at least start this process, right? They wrote back to us and said, oh, thanks for doing this. There was no incentive. There was no request to get this done before you folks came on board.
Wow.
And again, it just goes to...
This is the Department of Health.
Right. And they can't act unless asked to act. And unfortunately, they weren't asked to act until we got involved, which is, we're not trying to pat ourselves on the back, Friends Lackawanna on the back. It just seems like it's, I said, everything else we're going to say is going to defy common sense. This landfill is already huge, looking to expand in the middle of the densest community in the state that has a landfill of this size. They want to go for 50 more years, and there's never been a health study or environmental study done. Just keep saying that out loud and think, what good comes out of this? It feels like you're in the bizarre world the deeper you get in this.
Yeah.
You think you're going crazy sometimes because you're thinking, how can this possibly be evaluated and considered right now?
Well, it defies all rational thinking.
It does.
On every level.
Every level.
So
And if that's not enough, I mean, there have already been 4 subsurface fires, right?
No, what's a subsurface fire?
It's called a subsurface something
Oxidation
event. It's a fire.
Fire underground.
And there's like
Petroleum distribution engineer is a
right?
gas station attendant.
And it's funny because, it's over this incredible source of fuel. We've got coal mines, former mines underneath and
natural
garbage
gas
itself, it's like, it's it's not a matter of if, it's when will there be a natural disaster, some sort of a disaster in this. So we've had 4 subsurface oxidation events.
Let's just call it a ground fire.
It's a subsurface fire.
So basically what it is somewhere down there, amongst the layers,
yes,
a fire has started.
That's what happens. Yeah. And
did you know this, Rich?
No idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fire started. Yeah. So there's a fire.
In St. Louis, it's so bad right now. Like that when it really gets going, the smells are like, people say it smells like death, right? Like, and it just permeates the entire area. So, we hope that never happens. We know that down in the Lehigh Valley, there's a landfill. We're not sure if it's pronounced Shrin or Crin, but remember that earthquake back in 2012?
Yes.
Felt some aftershocks here.
Yes.
Those aftershocks actually caused a landslide at one of those landfills that to this day has not been fully repaired.
Wow. Let's play a little trivia question now.
What's that?
What do you think's going on with that landfill right now?
Yeah.
Blasting.
No, they're seeking expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the one down in Allentown.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't fix our landslide, but
it's
we
still
really
there.
need
It's
to be bigger.
The road. Yeah, they want to expand.
It's blocking the road?
Yeah, they still haven't cleared the road, but they want to expand.
Of literally crap.
Yeah.
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 And they're not the biggest.
Not even close to the Keystone.
Not even close. And here's the other thing about our landfill. We're built over like former mines. So there's a lot of voids underneath there. So a geotechnical firm, and a good one, I'm going to say, had to come in and do all these boreholes to make sure that the weight of all this garbage wouldn't make it collapse. However, one of the project leaders is a nephew of the owners, so there's just everywhere you look, there seems to be some conflicts, and right, the sewer authority is supposed to regulate the landfill, and yet they share the same.
Isn't that a conflict of interest? Isn't like all of this a conflict of interest?
It is, but that's also a problem with the regulations. If they can get, if you can do that, then you're going to do that. Like that's one of the things that needs to be fixed in the regulations that shouldn't be allowed, right? And another thing that I think is problematic is the sewer authority and the landfill share the same engineer and the same solicitor. So tell me how one's watching the other.
So they have the same engineer and the same lawyer.
Yes.
In the landfill happens to be one of, if not the largest, quote unquote, customers of the sewer authority as well.
So this means revenue for the sewer authority.
In theory. I think there's more to it, right? I mean, depending on what's being shipped from the landfill.
Well, when you say you're a customer,
well, it's either customer or cost, right? I mean, if you're getting shipped stuff that needs a lot more treatment, is it revenue or is it costing actually more?
I mean, at the end of the day, who is benefiting from this landfill at all?
Right. So the owners of the landfill, whoever owns that company, benefits, and the people that work there probably do as well. Though we would say in the grand scheme of things, the number of people that work in this landfill or any landfill in a community have such a negative impact on the surrounding economy and companies that would want to move there, that those jobs don't even come close to numbering the jobs that don't come or don't want to come because of the size of a landfill.
Now, when you guys went up there for your tour, did you talk to any of the employees up there? Mm-hmm. Did you ask where they were from?
So we went up twice. We went up for their open house. Mm-hmm. We've been there several times.
Usually open houses have balloons.
It did. Well, balloons and hot dogs. I wasn't exaggerating.
10 hot dogs. Yeah, for real.
No, for real.
I mean, were they cheap hot dogs or were they like ballparks or were they?
We didn't eat them.
Didn't drink.
That's probably a good idea.
Didn't drink any water either.
Yeah, and the second time, the landfill at that point was being engaged in conversation with. They had all their, minus the owners, all of their leadership took us on this tour on the bus, and so we had the chief the people in charge of engineering and stuff up there, and they took us on it. So we knew some of them I don't know. We didn't ask them where from. The actual daily workers that are moving the garbage, no, we didn't talk to them and haven't asked where they're from.
Now, do you, as a lawyer and as an architect, usually, and to put it crudely, usually all of us, especially me, I think I have a pretty good bullshit detector. I mean, was your needles peaking?
Over there. I think that.
And I know that that's not a scientific question. That's just intuition. That's just street smarts.
I think everything that day was set up to be, look at how wonderful this is, but unfortunately we know too much, it's like, again, there's when you just see this grass over this mound, it's easy to imagine it's just a grassy hill. But when you really think of what's underneath there and what's getting into, I just think of a big garbage bag, right? Like with a little bit open on top, and that's the open face, that they try to cover every day.
It's an iceberg.
Yeah, basically. And that and that if you just pour water into that hole, into your trash bag, if you get some holes in that trash bag, which is the liner,
yes,
that's, it's probably thicker if you scale it than the actual liner. Like what's going to happen? Just all that water that gets in is going to seep out.
Well, just like electricity, stuff like that wants to find the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And where is
so it's going to make its way.
It doesn't stay within the limits of the boundaries of the landfill, right? I mean, you get into the groundwater, you get into the soil, and it just keeps going.
Well, let's explain something a little bit about groundwater. Like it's naturally there. Like underneath us, people don't realize that there's rivers.
Right.
In essence, that carry water.
A lot of people who have wells, that's where they get their water from.
Right, from groundwater. It's just like, it's not magically like it just replenishes itself. Right. There's actually an aquifer? Or
yes, an aquifer. Okay.
So I'm curious that if you go on Google Earth, which I'm assuming is very representative of what Earth is, and you look at the 81-380 Casey Highway interchange, and you zoom up a little bit, I notice what looks like a body of water to the north.
That's right. That's Dunmore Reservoir number 1. It's our backup drinking water supply, and it is approximately 425 feet from the boundary of the landfill.
So I could...
that should send chills through your body.
So 425 feet, basically a car going at 40 miles an hour can get there in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, and you'll hear like, it's back. We haven't used it since X. Okay, it's still our backup drinking supply.
Right.
Now, have you guys been? And it's underneath.
It would be lower than, so everything
elevation wise, it's lower than the landfill.
Right.
So. Just coming from a point of physics.
Yeah.
Deductive reasoning would tell you that it's not, nobody's saying it is.
Right.
But it's probable.
It's probable that
just through physics alone.
Whatever is underneath there
is kind of gradually, possibly, or definitely moving its way towards there.
And when it's 220 feet higher, what could blow into there?
Sure.
Like, how are you going to contain that garbage on that site? It's already all over the Casey Highway. It's.
I drove there yesterday, and I'm telling you, there's a moment where you hit, and you're like, oh,
yeah. It's my drive home. So I get it in the morning.
It doesn't smell like the vanilla car freshener.
No. And we had
it smells like newborn dad. Whoa.
We were hit with a $1.2 million bond trying to say that one of our cases was frivolous. What they tried to say and what the argument was in the bond hearing was, how do you know that's the landfill that's causing that smell? There's a mulch company, right over there too.
You got to get pretty close to the mulch.
But that was an argument, and they were making it passionately. And, fortunately, one of the women who was, on our side said, I love the smell of mulch. I know what mulch smells like.
Right.
It's not the landfill. It's a very distinct smell. Anybody who drives by the Casey Highway knows what that smell is.
It's weird. It's like this rotten egg, methane, weird smell that's
very distinct.
Yeah, that you've never smelled before.
Right.
Unless it was a bad situation.
Yeah, but I've certainly smelled a similar smell going by the landfills down in the Lehigh Valley. It's like if you go by a landfill, you get that methane, rotten egg, whatever it is, smell. It's very distinct. So
you could even keep it here, right? Another thing that defies logic and defies common sense is we have another landfill right here.
In Taylor,
right? Mm-hmm. Alliance. We've got 2 landfills. So people say garbage has to go somewhere.
Right.
Alliance I think it's between 30 and 40 years.
Yeah.
Alliance could take the local garbage for 30 to 40 years. Keystone is so much bigger. It could take it for decades and decades and decades on top of that. So people say we have to put the garbage somewhere. I assure you, we have plenty of space for our own garbage for decades and decades and decades to go. So why do they want the expansion? They want the expansion to make money. That's the only reason these things come up.
Sure. Now, why aren't more people talking about this? I mean, it seems like, you guys have gained a lot of ground in the last year and a half or so, but it seems like there's so many people are quiet about it, why aren't more people really concerned about this, especially because it's an obvious health issue?
I'll go first, and then Michele can follow, because we could talk about this answer for hours.
Sure.
So the first part, I think it goes down to, the laws of physics, right? Something stays in motion, is going to keep going. People, it's been there. And to really form an opinion, you have to do some thinking and reading and really evaluate what it is, because it's been there and people say, oh, it's been there. If you start reading the facts and you start thinking about things, it's crazy. But inaction is always easier than action, right? People default to sitting still.
Sure.
So that's part of it. I think the other part of it is, there's people are afraid to speak out against this issue in a lot of ways, given, the ownership structure of the landfill and who owns it. And, the owners of that landfill are quite generous in donating all around. They know a lot of people, and people feel like if they join our cause, it's a direct affront to them personally. Our position is and always has been, this fight has nothing to do with families or personalities at all. This is strictly about the fact that it makes no sense at all to expand a landfill for 50 years in the middle of a residential area.
That's it. It just doesn't. We're in the middle. A landfill does not belong in the middle of a thriving residential community. At its core, that's what this is about. It's about preserving our health. It's about preserving our community. It's about preserving our reputation. It's about all the wonderful things that could happen in this area. All the incredible things that I see, as Marky said, as an architect, that are in the works or in the planning stage, that could really transform this. I mean, we're all here. We love living here, clearly, you know? And
I moved back from the Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp was there. I came back here.
I came back from Washington, D.C., so no Johnny Depp. It wasn't as compelling. But
But you had Paul Ryan.
Oh, yes. Hot.
8% body fat.
But, it's, and I felt I didn't think I was going to stay here at the time, and fell back in love, right? And just realized how much there is to offer here. And yet, when I think of this 50-year expansion happening, I just see a black cloud over all of that, just stamped out. Like, I can't imagine a positive future with that happening. And the fact that people are afraid to speak out is unfortunate, because that's the only thing that's going to create the change.
Now, to be clear, there are a ton of people that are speaking out, right? So we don't want to sound like the priest in church who yells at the people that are in mass.
Right.
Right. Right. That's what happens. They yell at the people that are in church.
Sure.
We don't want to be that, because we are super grateful. We started out as I mentioned earlier, the crazy people that you were like, good job, but you're not going to win.
Yeah.
Every day, more and more people are speaking out. I mean, the event we had last Monday is a testament to that. We've got, and we were joking afterwards. I personally didn't know the great majority of the people there, which was a great sign, because at first it's your family and friends that support you, and then as you start expanding and as your movement grows, you start to not know as many people personally, which is great, because that means your movement is gaining traction. So this thing is really turned in towards of awareness and people willing to join our cause. We wish that more, and we hope that more, and that's why we do things like this podcast. And anyone that wants to talk about this, we're happy to talk about, because once you hear about it, I think it's pretty easy to form your own conclusions about it.
I mean, we'll get to you. Is it okay? You held the door for me on this one. We're so polite. I mean, full disclosure, like a year ago, I wanted to broach this, and I was warned.
Yeah. I was terrified to come out against it originally, I think, look, there is definitely, there's definitely like, the owners, they do all these great things for the area, but that landfill is the money they do it with, right? And
yeah, but it's like, it's like the person who, just because I have a frame of reference with sobriety and recovery and everything, it's like, I did the program, I'm sober, but that doesn't make up for the decade of crap that I caused for everyone. Like I shouldn't get a free pass because I did something good.
Yeah.
You know, you can do good things and do harmful things.
Sometimes I feel it's
They shouldn't even out.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
They shouldn't even be compared. They're two totally distinct issues.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, like I said, I was politely told, don't have an opinion. Don't have a public opinion.
Yeah.
Mark,
but
I think a ton of people, that was the take of a ton of people. And I think when people objectively sit back and take a look and say, is this area, fundamentally, if you had to boil it down to one question, is this area better or worse off if this expansion gets approved? Right.
To me, it's a no-brainer.
I think to everyone,
To
I can't
everybody.
imagine anyone would answer the areas.
And I think, and I don't know if anybody, you know, thinks about this. I mean, the economic impact it has, the real estate impact it has, the environmental impact it has. If you want to talk about money, let's talk about money, right? KSL makes a lot of money. All right. What about mom and pop businesses? What about the diners in Dunmore? What about the diners in Throop? What about the mom and pop shop that's the handyman store?
What about the daycares and the parks and the YMCA? What about all these places right around it? You know, I worry about those places.
I mean, because I mean those the daycares and the parks and you know even the YMCA line that section of 81.
Yeah.
So on one side is a landfill.
Right.
On the second side is a place where kids play and grow up and learn.
There's no imaginary barrier keeping all the stuff at the landfill. You know?
It's not a science fiction film. It's reality.
It's reality. And that stuff is traveling, you know? And so I just start to think like, how can we be silent about this? How can our home values be at risk? How can our health be at risk? And how can people not be, and then to Pat's point, people are. I think the shift is absolutely happening. I think it's finally like, what? Like, why would we just put up with that? Why would we do that?
Even the media to an extent. I applaud the Scranton Times for all the stuff that they've done on this, because there are other media organizations that are silent about this issue.
I also applaud WBRE.
Yes,
same.
WBRE has been great too. I mean, they were there the other night.
The thing that scares me, and I don't want to call anybody to task, and I'll F it, I'll speak about it, whatever. The problem with this situation is that if you look at, I believe WNEP has an 80% market share.
Yeah.
Which means 80% of the people watching local news, they're watching WNEP.
Yeah.
Watch
BRE.
If they cover
Yeah.
this particular subject,
Yeah.
their ad revenue goes down.
Yes. I mean,
because certain companies will pull.
In a lot of cases, it's always follow the money, right?
But we had a big event and it didn't get any coverage, and it was a pretty significant event. So I guess people can draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, just again, let's come back to the common sense reality field, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we like to live, Pat.
I try to live there all the time, Mark.
Yeah,
you've got an event, a free event that's educational for the public. That is the topic of which is, in our opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion, the most impactful thing that will happen in this area and could impact it for 50 plus years, with a federal senator, a state senator, and one of the most, a Harvard educated toxicologist and the most famous environmental activist of our generation.
In the head.
In one room.
Of DEP.
In the head, John Quigley, right? The head of DEP. In one room, in downtown Scranton, with plenty of notice, and Channel 16 doesn't show up. I'm not pointing fingers. I don't know what their rationale was. They said they had breaking news, I think. Okay, maybe that's true. I promise you there wasn't a more important event happening in this region that night than us. And it's not because we put it together.
Yeah, but usually what happens is you send the camera crew, and the camera crew leaves because of breaking news.
Yeah, I can't speak to
How do you anticipate breaking news?
Yeah, I can't explain the logistics of it. It was frustrating because, again, they don't have to cover an event, but given the lineup, ignore the topic, just the people that were there. How is that not local news?
Well, you're not representing your viewers.
It seems crazy, but it was their choice, you know?
So what was the kind of like the feedback from that? I mean, where I really stood up and took notice was, I have a relative involved with your organization. And I was told, hey, why don't you stop by the Dunmore, the meeting you guys had at the Dunmore High School.
Oh yeah.
I don't see that many adults show up for a play that all their kids are in.
Right.
It was standing room only in the auditorium, and people were being turned away at the door.
So by way of background for listeners that aren't familiar with the event here, this was a public hearing that the DEP held in Dunmore of last year at the Dunmore High School. It was open to the public. There were so many people at that event, they had to lock the auditorium and wouldn't let anyone else in.
Which I think is against fire code.
Well,
but what do I know?
That's why they closed it. They said we're at max capacity, and it was jammed. I think it was from 6 to 10, if I recall. Or 6
it was
to
over
9.
4 hours.
It ran out of time.
Yeah.
They had to cut off questions. Once you realize what you're dealing with and what you're looking at in terms of a future, people do seem to care. And they do show up when you give them the opportunity to do so. I think our organization has been a help in that, in helping get the word out, because it's hard to follow everything. We'll distill that information for you. Just go to friendslackawanna.org or go to Facebook/friendslackawanna. You'll see all the information, and people, every event we've had the DEP meetings we help get people out. We had the meeting on Monday. we've had our own informational meetings. The rooms are filled.
Yeah.
People care about this.
They
thing.
do. We're so proud of the people who,
and you should be. We just need more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing, and you know what? I think the thing that really scared me was I went to the zoning board meeting.
Yeah.
I'm fat. Look, I watched 7 seasons of The West Wing in like 3 weeks. I'm fascinated.
Speaking of podcasts, there's a new podcast on. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's
on The West Wing?
Episode by episode narration of The West Wing, starting at 001.
Who's narrating it?
One of the actress from the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Here's what we did. Here's what this was about.
Yeah.
Here's how the walk and talk was created. One of the things that was very frightening to me was it was actually a couple of things. Like the zoning board meeting was like every one of them, I just wanted to rip my hair out and scream.
Yes.
Some of it was dull, as meetings are.
Yes.
And then there were some moments where it's like, you guys brought in a 30-year professional.
40. Yeah.
40 years? Who that was his life.
Yeah.
Landfills.
Yeah.
And they discredited him as a witness.
Yeah, they said he I don't know, they hadn't looked
Yeah,
at
so
that
the-
landfill.
so-
What was the exact word that
He wasn't qualified as an expert because he hadn't worked specifically on this landfill,
Right.
even though he's designed landfills for the last 30 years.
And now my thing is like, if my heart's in trouble and I need a heart surgeon, the guy who maybe not have a license but has been doing, and he was licensed, he had all of his credentials and everything. Yeah. But I'd rather have the guy who's been successfully performing heart surgeries illegally for 40 years than the kid who just got out of med school. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Experience.
I mean, we didn't pull him up.
The experience is way more than the degree.
Right.
If you've been doing it for
But
that
he had
long.
the experience and the degree.
Right, which is the thing that blew my mind. And the
Yeah.
guy came and he was, I think, just as dumbfounded. Like the look on his face was like,
Yeah.
what? Like it was almost like, is my whole life a lie?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah. You try to tell people how things are up here and they don't believe it till they see it.
This is a whole different world,
Yeah,
man.
It really is. It's a little crazy. And the other thing that we feel is like the parallels to what happened in Flint, Michigan, and what's happening here are very eerie.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
It's eerie. It really is, because, in Flint, the people were screaming and shouting and showing evidence and had all kinds of medical professionals backing them and, showing the water that was like, we're doing that same thing. We are screaming to our elected officials. We are screaming to the DEP. And, particularly in the beginning, it was like screaming at a wall. Right. I mean, we've moved the needle really far to the point that I think the tides have shifted.
Yeah.
But it was very much like Flint, in so much as you feel like at first we felt belittled and marginalized, and we were told over and over, you're wasting your time, and it's just so similar. And so we this time we want to learn from that. We want to learn from the failures, the systematic failures in government and in the regulatory agencies in Flint, and get in front of it.
Those are just crimes.
Yeah. Let's not let that be. Well, hey, is it that much different here?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Right? That's why we're talking.
That's why we're talking. Right?
It was just a few months ago that people were sharing this article around, and then it came up again because I think USA Today or one of those type of magazines also did a study or was citing a similar study, and then that got shared around again about the water in Flint, Michigan, and it was talking about how Pennsylvania has all this lead in the water, and that it's in some cases 12 times more than the stuff that they were talking about in Flint. And people are sharing this, like, being outraged, and it's like you do realize there's much more to it than that. Like we're just talking about the lead in the water from lead pipes and paint chips and things like that. Like this is a whole other level of that kind of stuff. I mean, this is outrageous.
It's really outrageous. I mean, again, as Pat said before, sometimes I just sit and think, there's John Oliver's show on.
I love The Last Word.
Excellent.
Right?
Last Week Tonight.
Last Week Tonight. There's a thing called "How Is This Still a Thing?"
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just sit here after a year and a half, and I'm like, how is this still a thing?
Right.
How has this just not been stopped out of sheer lunacy and common sense? Like a 5-year-old could tell you that this is a bad idea. We shouldn't even. Why are we even talking about it? Why? Like, why?
And speaking of which, have you seen any outside media outside of northeastern Pennsylvania? Like, shouldn't the New York Times be on this? Shouldn't all the major newspapers that you think are when you think of in terms of breaking these types of stories and making them huge?
It's much more sensational when you're like a Flint and the tragedy's already happened. Right. So here we are trying to preempt it and say, hey, before it happens, let's right now. Let's act right now.
Well, I think they're almost waiting for it to happen, so then they can write.
But the scary thing is to reach that level. Mm-hmm. And this is, I could be totally wrong, but just for me thinking this, like, you got to have a body. Like, you know what I mean? That's the thing that makes it scary. And you guys are trying to avoid anything that has to do with that.
We don't want to be another cautionary tale. We don't want Flint to have been in vain, or so many issues like it across the country, right? There are so many communities that have suffered.
Sure.
And because of inaction, because of people not being listened to, because of not looking at the facts, because of power, money, influence, we don't want that. We are saying, hey, we have an opportunity right now to stop this, to stop the madness, as they say, and not be another sad story. Right. So But
this has been going on for over a century, even with the coal. I mean, if you go down past Old Forge on Main Avenue, it's like that whole river's orange.
Right. Well, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. Right.
And that's what it seems like it's happening. It's like, that's why I had history. That's why I enjoyed history class in school, because I was like, oh, they made mistakes.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do that.
So let's not do that again.
It's a good segue into this notion of environmental justice, right? Because there's this theory that people that get polluted upon and get taken advantage of continue to get taken advantage of, because once you have something, you're more likely to have more of it, and you're going to keep it. So there's this notion of environmental justice is a big thing in the U.S. right now. So sections of Dunmore have been declared an environmental justice community. And that means more than 20% of a certain area are either minority or economically under a certain threshold. And Dunmore has sections that qualify as that. So what does that mean? It means that you're supposed to get more notice and more protections, because there is this notion that if you do the studies, areas that are have polluting industries have more polluting industries, right? Going back to your question, Mark, before about money. So what does that mean? The problem is in Pennsylvania, that flies directly in the face of what happens with landfills, right? Because with landfills, a landfill has to, by statute, pay the municipality where it sits a certain amount of money. It's called the host municipality fee.
Right.
So you've got these not great off economic areas that have a landfill and get paid for it. By the way, the case law on the subject says, well, that fee is there to encourage people to take landfills. Okay, so what communities can least afford to say no to money.
Impoverished.
Right. The ones that need it the most. Right.
Right.
And then once you get it, it's like a little bit of crack, right? Just how do you say no to it? You get addicted to it. That's your lifeline. So you've got this happening all over the country. And we're just an example of it. We're just doing it, go big or go home, man. We're going for 50 years.
So I'm sure there's trends amongst landfills and stuff like that when they get the host fee, right? What's the average of a host fee for a community?
Yeah, so it varies state by state. In Pennsylvania is the state we're most familiar with. I think the average across the state is about $4 per ton of garbage to the host municipality.
So every ton of garbage that comes in, $4 goes to the municipality on average.
I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think that's
the
number.
So what's the number Dunmore is getting?
Dunmore until December of 2014 was getting 41 cents per ton of garbage.
Excuse me?
Mandated by the state. They had to pay that no matter what.
So they're at, so we're going to get into the weeds here. The landfill split 60% in Throop, 40% in Dunmore, roughly, right? So the state says you can't pay a host city less than $1 a ton. So Dunmore got 40% of $1, the state minimum fee since the day that landfill was created. Wow. They then negotiated with it to get a new contract, and now they get $1.20 a ton, I think. Because
even though the average is $4,
right? Well, Throop gets some too. So $2. Throop gets $2. Dunmore gets $1.20. So it's below, certainly below market rate, but it's not insane as it was. The problem though is that money does what? It goes right into their application for expansion, and they get credit for it.
Wait, what do you? Wait.
Right.
Explain it to me. Explain it to me like I'm as stupid as I am.
I'll try not to be as boring as I am in the answer. The landfill, so here's how it works. It's called the harms benefits analysis. And the landfill submits a document to the state and said, here are all of the benefits to this project, and here are all the harms and potential harms of this project. To win, you have to prove that the benefits clearly outweigh both the harms plus the potential harms. On its face, you can't do that right now, given everything we've talked about today already. But the thing that every landfill cites are the fees. So they get to put in their application, here are all the fees we're going to pay the state, which is like $6.25 a ton, plus the municipality, which is in this case like $3 and some cents a ton now. And the courts and the DEP have said, okay, cool, you get credit for that. So let's not be naive about this. Why did this landfill at this particular moment in time happen to renegotiate their contract, which, parenthetical, was the worst contract in the state, to this one, which is still the worst one in the state, just a little less worse? It's because they get credit for it in their application status.
As a benefit?
As a benefit. It's a legal benefit, which is, again, let's keep talking about defying common sense, right? This is all, at the end of the day, the landfill benefits are all about money.
So when you talk about harms and potential harms, right? Some would argue that potential harms are could-haves, maybes.
Right. And they're intended to be that.
Okay. Is there any hardcore harms, like, that are undeniable, that this is going to be a harm?
Property values.
Property values.
Scientifically proven.
Potential harms.
Health.
Do you remember?
Groundwater.
Do you remember in their harms benefit analysis?
Right. So not only they get to cite the harms, but then they get an opportunity to mitigate each and every harm.
Mitigate, i.e., argue that
they get to tell you why it's not really a big harm. So they'll say, well, there is the potential that this leachate could leak into the river, but we've got a lagoon system there, so it's really not that much of a possibility. Even though there's evidence that they've bypassed it. In every single harm, they get the opportunity to do such.
It's called remediate, and I can't stand that word now, because it's like, this is a perpetually polluting entity. At some point it's can't designed. Remediate it anymore. They only have to watch it for 30 years after it closes, right? So the other thing about,
but it's also earth, water, air.
It's earth, water, air, and all three are being compromised right now. All three. So
without a doubt,
and so they, it's almost like right now it's set up so the onus is on the people to prove that that the landfill is harming them, when really the onus should be on the landfill to prove they're not harming the people, right? And that's a real problem with how the whole system works at the moment, and
so I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So what
No,
you're trying
don't agree
what
with
you're
that.
trying to say to me is that when multi-million, potentially $billion endeavor
Yeah.
that has possibly endless wealth
Yeah.
to mitigate their harms, what's being told to you is that the people,
Yeah.
the hardworking people of Dunmore,
Show us how it's hurting you.
have to prove, which takes money, which takes
Time.
resources, which takes time.
We walked the reservoir with the medical society. Was that? It's like the Lackawanna Medical Society, and the gentleman we walked with said, "Well, I don't understand what the harms are here. Like, unless you do a double-blind study, blah 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 blah. Like, then you really can't prove that it's harming the community. Like, what are you talking about?
It's like when you see all these reports and documentaries of people lighting their water on fire,
Yeah.
and you have these officials going, well, yeah,
There's
but-
naturally occurring methane in the ground. That's all that is.
yeah,
Every
it's-
time?
Are you kidding?
Like, do you get healthier living next to a landfill? You
Right.
know, like is that
Well,
is that
methane.
good
Let's
for
talk
you?
methane, right?
Yeah.
It's a hot topic right now.
Mhm.
An enormous amount of methane is produced and escapes into the atmosphere from this landfill and is burned off. They sell what they can. The rest of it gets burned on site and just goes into the atmosphere.
Really?
Yeah. So what breaks down, a naturally occurring byproduct of breaking down landfills is methane. They have these pipes that come out of the ground. If they can't sell it to someone, they burn it.
And that's the gas that's getting into the air. There's also been studies about gas migrating through the coal seams underneath it and getting into residential homes.
Well, just like why it finds the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And the likely source was alleged to be the landfill. And there was a study that was going to find out for sure. And it just mysteriously got stopped.
Well, I mean, look how much how far cancer research has come, and yet we still don't know so much
Yeah.
about people who get cancer and forms of cancer and things like that. So there are people who might be affected by some of this stuff now that we're not going to see until they're 50, 60 years old or
Right.
older or whatever, and then you could blame it on 100 other things.
Sure.
You say, he was a smoker. He worked here or there. So it's so hard to pinpoint them as the exact cause of anything.
And they leverage that.
Sure.
It's so hard that it's so hard to prove it in air quotes that they're actually contemplating a 50-year landfill expansion, like because it's so hard to prove that. And so, what Stephen Lester, the toxicologist, said at our event, he said, that's why it's up to the people. That's why people need to make noise. That's why we have to mobilize and tell the elected officials and tell the DEP. And like, that's, it's like the Margaret Mead quote, the only thing, never underestimate a group of thoughtful, committed citizens. It's the only thing that's ever changed the world, and that's paraphrasing, but but that's the idea. And it's like, truly, that's what it takes. And we've said before, like, if this isn't your issue, stand for something. But there is a fulfillment to working on something that you really feel passionate is gonna. I really feel like we're gonna save lives if we stop this expansion. That's my opinion, right? Like, but I just, like, the more I know, I'm like, there's absolutely nothing that makes me think that anything good is coming out of this. And as Lois said, how dare they? Like, I grew up in Swinnix, and and I just think of where that, if this expansion happens, like, the town I love, Dunmore, what's going to happen? Already the industrial park, who's there that's not connected to the landfill in some way?
How many families are in Swinnock? Best guess.
There was an exact number done at the landfill at the zoning hearing. I don't recall what the number was. It's a ton of
Hundreds, thousands, hundreds of families.
100 houses,
Maybe 100. Yeah.
So about 100 families.
Yeah.
With kids.
Oh yeah.
What has DEP done any testing?
They've done
intense testing.
No, nothing intense. They did the mobile analytical unit went out and did an air study.
Which is
And-
probably from, can you get that at CVS?
Yeah, it's not the most scientific
van.
thing. But I'll tell you what, it didn't show good things. It didn't show good things in the air off the site of the landfill.
So they haven't even, so DEP hasn't even gone in there, and is that because they don't have the resources, or is that because, look, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a...
No, it's a little bit of both, right? So
Michelle, is that your phone?
I put mine on mute, but it does sound like mine. But I put it on the do not disturb.
Hold on, it might be KSL.
No. What have I done? Yeah, it's in the outside.
that's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, it stopped.
Excellent.
Because they knew it was
I'm always...
There's a 100% chance that call is about this issue. Literally, it's after 8 o'clock is like the bat signal goes out.
So they haven't done any research.
No, so
that you guys, because the DEP is there to protect us, and Kennedy's, or not Kennedy,
according to their mission.
Casey, according to the Constitution, we have the right to clean water,
Yep.
clean air.
The aesthetics of the environment, and those are the big things: clean air, clean water, and
the right to a healthy environment.
the right to a healthy.
So if
beautiful
anything,
environment.
DEP should be there to at least prove that you have that.
Right.
Okay, so they've done nothing.
Yeah.
They
And-
monitor the site, so they then they collect.
Do they watch like eating a fillet of fish in a truck, or like
what? They generate a report every couple weeks, on-site report.
But is it observational? So there's nothing there to be like.
No, they have they have water monitoring wells on there and gas wells and stuff, and that's what you have to do. Dig into the data, though, right? That's the data that we can get and dig into. The issue with things like collecting, we're grateful for the Department of Health that started collecting this air sampling that the DEP will look at, but they're going to collect it over a 90-day sampling period, right? They're looking at a 50-year expansion for something that's already been there for 30 plus years.
Right, a 3-month test for...
That's the beginning of a baseline. That's not a health study or an environmental study. It's the beginning of a baseline by which you can compare other data to, because unfortunately, there's no data to compare anything to right now. So best case, what you're doing right now is getting some data to start looking at this. How you can even consider an expansion, and especially one of this scope with that limited amount of data, defies logic and quite frankly is dangerous, right? So there's two outcomes here. Either this expansion does harm or does good. Why would you risk it that it could... let me rephrase that. Can't do good. It can do harm or less harm. Right? Why roll the dice on that?
Sure.
Right? It
Well,
doesn't...
without properly... look,
Right.
let's go to the law.
Mm-hmm.
Without... Are you going to walk into a case without doing discovery? You're going to go to trial?
In this case, you can.
No, you.
Right. No, you never would.
Because you wouldn't represent any of your clients at all if you didn't do discovery. You're just, hey, Bob, we'll wing it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not, but even you as an individual
Right.
would never do that because it's not fair.
Right. That's really what, at the essence of, I think if you boil it down to why do we fight, it's just not fair. Right. And you can't use that and get on your soapbox and yell, it's not fair without having the facts and the details and the arguments and the logic behind it. But at its core, this is an issue about fairness. How much does this area need, we keep saying enough is enough. That's probably used in every environmental case in the country. But what burden does this area specifically have to bear? And for how many years? And how long are we just going to sit back and say, oh, whatever, we'll see what happens? It doesn't seem like that's a wise course of action if we want this to be a healthy place in the future.
So doing my public school math, right? Mm-hmm. And now you thought, Michelle, when you first started doing this, you just thought it was a 10-year lease or whatever, and then it was going to be over.
Yeah, about 5 years, it'll be done. Clench your
So
teeth.
Potentially, if this goes through, this landfill will not shut down until 2066.
Well, here's the thing. That's probably when they'll apply for another 50-year expansion, because right now, under the current regulations, this could go on forever. We asked the consultant for the
So there's no
landfill.
end in sight, even on paper.
No. When we asked the landfill consultant, like, why 50 years? Like, why? He said, because we couldn't fit 100. That's all that.
Are you shitting me?
I'm not kidding. That is like literally all that like within the current boundaries and given the engineering how high it will let things go. That's as high as they could make it, and be quote unquote stable and technically sound, supposedly. So that's why it's 50 years, because that's all they can cram into that site. Now, I'm pretty sure the owners own a lot around that site,
Well, let's pause right there for a second in terms of just talk about the 50 years, right? So the 50 years is based on their current amount of waste that they take in per day. They're on average at 7,250 tons a day, maximum of 7,500 tons a day. So if you take a trip down memory lane, here's how this landfill has started. They started with up to 1,000 tons a day. Then they were allowed up to 2,500 tons a day. Then they're allowed 5,000 tons a day. Now they take 7,500 tons a day. If you just use historical precedent and just look at what's happened, the minute this expansion goes through, the plans are going to be in the works to start taking more, right? The initial application, I believe, had, as Michele mentioned earlier, the ability to receive waste by train.
Mm-hmm. Which then went away.
So the 50 years, it might not be 50 years. It might be 25. But then you're taking 30 million pounds of garbage a day. I mean...
And how do you, but at the same time, when you're bringing in that much, how do you stay, even as a business, right? So let's say like no environmental issues, nothing like that. How do you keep up with that much garbage coming in?
You bring more.
Take it from further away.
Yeah, you got 750 acres. It's a
Yeah,
pretty big place.
but what I'm saying is if it could be up. So right now it's 7,500
tons a day.
Mm-hmm. And if it in a God forbid it's 20,000.
Yeah.
By definition, you now have to hire twice as many people.
Yeah,
twice as many vehicles. You need whatever your pumps are and everything, your processing plants and everything. You need to double them.
Mark, that's a good point, because let's pause. Let's go back to that. This thing has been building and building and building for decades, right?
Yeah.
What you just said is a really smart point. Was this intended to house 100 years of garbage when that first liner was laid down? I suspect not.
Because they can't go back and replace it.
Right. So was this always the plan? I don't think so. I've never seen anything that says that. If there's already problems now, why would you stack another 50 years worth on top of it?
Well,
what are the underlying systems right now?
I'm having problem in my marriage right now. Let's go another 50.
Yeah, it's just piling on.
You're going to hop out of it.
Here's another podcast for you for a later date. I think all marriages should be 5-year contracts renewable.
Okay.
Like a lease.
Yeah. It makes people
Rent to
perform
own.
better. Anyway.
And here's the other thing. When the huge environmental disaster inevitably and eventually happens, and it will, the contract that currently exists does not have any language in it to cover that. And we asked about it.
Oh, wait. So it's...
No,
there's no certificate of insurance?
No, there's like a $30 million bond that I think also has to cover closure. I mean, there's nothing that would, in all of the examples across the country, when there have been massive landslides or underground fires or you name it, the people who end up paying are always the citizens. It's happening in Flint now too, right? Like,
the taxpayers. They have to pay for the...
Eventually.
It's going to be our problem, not theirs. There is no language. There are no term limits in that contract. There are no environmental protections. There are like tons of things that we kept asking to be put into the contract that the owners would not allow to be
So
put
when
in.
the shit hits the fan,
right,
you,
me, whoever's around, our future generations who we seem to have just
our kids, grandkids,
no concern for at the moment, right?
Yeah,
they're going to be left holding a literal shit bag. Sorry, but like that's what they're going to be.
I think
left,
it's bag of shit.
Whatever it is, they're going to be left holding it. And there's
analogies and cliches aren't Michelle's strong point.
We covered that early.
People who live in glass houses shouldn't cross the street.
I love to mix metaphors too. That's my favorite.
Yeah, you're like Schwarzenegger in T2. You're just like.
But this was a quote. This is a quote by the New York State Health Department Commissioner David Axelrod talking about Love Canal back in the day. He said, "To this day, the Love Canal incident is remembered as a national symbol of a failure to exercise a sense of concern for future generations." And that's
incredibly apropos to today.
To today.
And tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, what are we leaving the future?
So we want to build a future, right?
Right.
Every single landfill you'll talk to, they'll all tell you how great they are. we're environmentally responsible, we're cutting edge technology. Yet they've been doing the same thing for the last 30 years. So the line we keep
they're working under DEP regulations from 30 years ago, correct?
That's right. 100,
Right,
yes.
exactly. Yeah. And the line we keep saying over and over and over again that really people seem to grasp easily is, it's 2016. That's like saying you have the best dial-up internet around.
Yeah.
No one wants dial-up internet. It's a thing of the past. Like,
Or this phone that's connected to a bag, I can drive down the highway and talk to people.
Yeah.
It's $1,200, but it's amazing. People would look at that. It's archaic.
yeah, it's time to start building for the future. And if things like this happen, and this specifically happens, unfortunately, I think it tarnishes the entire region. And I don't see a way out of that.
I don't want to. I don't. You two seem very smart. But you don't. But you're. I don't know. I don't think.
deceiving.
But you're not. When I say
my analogies,
when I say smart, when I
did you miss that?
that's just a joke. That has nothing to do with intelligence. You could tell a bad joke.
We don't even actually know what analogies are because I think we're using analogies and metaphors incorrectly too. So it's not.
That's all right. So, I think you guys have enough life experience and education to at least come up with a plausible idea of the future, a reasonable idea of what the future is going to be, not like the Independence Day version of like, aliens are going to come destroy the planet. We really have nothing to worry about.
Dystopia. Yeah.
Just looking through what you look through, all the documents, all the scientific reports, talking to people who have experienced this. Lois Gibbs, 37 years steeped in it.
Yeah.
Where do you, realistically, what do you see happening community-wise, economic-wise, health-wise, and not speaking as like, the end times are near,
Right.
but coming from a point of like, realistically, this is what this area is going to look like in 10 years. This is what this area is going to look like in 20 years.
If the expansion
if it goes
happened.
through, yeah.
Yeah, the pot of boiling water slowly boils to death.
Yeah.
We slowly decline. It's not going to be this, everyone packs up their bags and leaves.
It's going to be gradual.
It's just going to be slow and a gradual decline while this goddamn mountain grows and grows and grows. There's people have lives, people have businesses, people have leases, people have X, Y, and Z. You don't just haul up and cancel everything unless there's, God forbid, an actual disaster that, evacuates everything like Love Canal. But over time, fewer people, we've got this massive brain drain area already, right? People leave the area after they get educated. They come to school here and don't come back. We're trying to help reverse that. That's not going to happen with things like this.
Well, I don't think, I think people have this nostalgic feeling about people coming back, quote unquote.
We all did, right?
Yeah, but what that means is it means new tax revenue. Right. It means money towards infrastructure. It means building up your community. It means having an after school program for arts or whatever. It means all that. What you're saying right now is like, and I think that's part of the reason of Scranton. It's like the population has declined, yet we're paying the same bills. Like you got to get rid of some shit, or else you're going to go broke. That place is, in my estimation, like Centralia, see ya, we're still going to make money.
So I think that there's the irony in this one of the ironies of this issue is by raising this issue, sometimes you'll catch flack from people saying like, you're really talking negative if this thing happens. And you have to. You can't.
It's a negative thing.
Well, you can't put your head in the sand and just pretend it doesn't happen. You got to face your issues to make them better. You can't just ignore them, right? So the people that are saying these negative things, friends of Lackawanna, people that are talking to us like this, it's not negative because we want them to be. It's negative because we're fighting for a more positive and actual chance at a better future. It's not this doomsday scenario. We're trying to prevent that, as Michele said. That's the whole point. Get ahead of it.
But you're negative. See, the thing about the truth is positive and or negative.
Right.
This is all true.
Right. The facts, it is what it is.
So when anybody says you're being negative, that's good because apparently you're taking the truth and seeing it as a bad thing.
Right.
So why don't you do something about it?
And like you said before, where is the positive? I mean, what positive can you say about a landfill expansion? You know?
Who does it benefit the town of Dunmore, the towns of Dunmore and Throop?
Yeah, in the short term, because they get these host city fees. In the long term, we believe it drives out every business.
But
out of the
who
area.
gets it? You know,
The
like
borough.
but
The actual townships.
But let's say I live in Dunmore. Do I see a penny of that?
This year, your garbage fees were removed.
But that doesn't. So that saved me what, a year?
$150, I think.
So in essence, we're going to poison you. Here's $150. Thank you.
Right. And your home value, depending on where you live, has been.
So if my house is worth $100,000, now it's worth $86,000,
Right.
and I'm like, oh yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't
But I
notice.
got $150
I don't have
from
to pay
the
a
trash.
garbage fee. Yeah. No.
So that's the only benefit to the citizens of Dunmore and Throop.
Yes.
It's money.
Is that they saved $150 on their garbage fees and lost 14% of their home's worth.
Right. And the borough has more money theoretically to do things with. The problem is that's not a sustainable future,
Right.
right?
No.
Without a tax base, you don't have a sustainable
Again, this thing
future.
slowly erodes, right? That's why it's kind of hard to wrap your arms around this, because it's not an immediate drop off a cliff. It's a slow
It takes
erosion of everything. It's a slow erosion of people not moving back. It's a slow erosion of companies not starting here. It's a slow erosion of companies not moving here. How many failed economic projects have we heard about in this area? Let's get some off the
Countless.
ground. There's a bunch of them that have started. The med school is a great example. But that stuff stops if things like this go forward.
Because nobody's going to want to come here.
Why
Right.
would you?
Why would you?
That's a terrible thing to say.
Well,
right?
underneath you don't know what's going on.
Why take that
based on
chance?
one source?
Why would you take that chance? Why would you put your family in that potential harm's way?
I don't understand why the people of Greenridge aren't, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I'd be irate as a mother or a father or a resident, especially of Greenridge.
Yeah.
You know, these are people who complain about potholes, but when their house stinks,
Yeah.
where are you?
And I think that's starting to change. I think if you looked at the makeup of that event on Monday, there are a lot of people I knew from the Greenwich area as well.
Are you starting to see more vocal support from them?
Yeah. And I think they're just finding out about the change to the permit. I think they're just, I think this is all new information. And, I do think there is outrage, and I do think people are mad. And I hope we see them. I hope they're vocal about it. Because again, and I'm going to keep hammering this point home, it's the tides are turning, and it's going to be the people. It's going to be getting involved. It's going to be writing letters to your elected officials and the DEP. It's going to be making noise. Like, that is what's going to cause the change here. That is
so the thing that could slay Goliath.
Yeah.
And look, I don't think anybody in this room wants any harm to come to anybody who is employed there or who owns it.
Nope.
It's just like enough is enough. Like, you have to realize what you're doing. So the only thing that people can do is be active.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's gonna really change the tide of the whole thing
absolutely
in an enormous way.
That's what it's going to take. Absolutely.
Now, how can people do that?
I think a huge thing they can do is putting the pressure, writing to elected officials and writing to the DEP.
Now, a lot of people don't know who their elected officials are.
So here we make it really easy.
Yeah.
Go to friendslackawanna.org, and we have forms already built that will automatically send it to everyone. The DEP officials, the state officials.
You
the
guys
federal
are so
officials.
on it.
We've been on it for 18 months now. It wasn't like the
That's
first
2
day we
full-term
figured that out.
pregnancies. We are there.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question real quick about. I did go to the zoning meetings.
Yeah.
And I'm a layman. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
The argument that Friends of Lackawanna put up against the zoning board was that, in essence, what they were building was a structure.
Yep.
Now, according to Dunmore Charter, what is it?
Hearing board. Dunmore Hearing Board. Oh, the Dunmore Zoning Code.
The Dunmore Zoning Code.
Yeah.
You cannot have a structure over 50 feet tall.
That's correct.
Okay. I have a question for you, and I was there, and I think Jordan Yeager did a fantastic job with you guys. I especially enjoyed watching you speak. I was like,
cute.
man, that dude, like, he could be under sniper fire and just still be like cool, calm, and collected. It's amazing. I always wanted to pose this question because, listening to it and the arguments and everything, like when I think of a structure, I think it's something, it could be the Eiffel Tower, going back to the scale. If in 50 years, they say they're done, magically we figure out a way to, remove dirt and garbage with a photon laser beam from space, what's going to be there? Because I always thought of it as like, there's going to be pipes and there's going to be...
That's exactly what it is.
So there's going to be 250 feet. If you removed all the dirt, all the garbage, all the linings, everything from out of there in 50 years, you're going to be left with
pipes,
literally a structure.
Pipes, anchor bolts. It looks like an
that kids can climb.
Yeah, it would look like an erector set.
Yeah.
And that's not a structure.
It's already
according to them.
Well, we say it is. The Pennsylvania courts say it is. The higher levels of courts that we're going to say it is. So we're super confident on that front. It's already been decided.
But I mean, does my stupid way of looking at it make sense?
Exactly right. So this is where all landfills, not just this one, talk out of both sides of their mouth. We are so complex and highly engineered and sophisticated, nothing to worry about. Not a structure, though.
No.
How do you say both of those things? Look at how intense these plans are and these pipes and we're capturing every ounce of methane you possibly can and we're anchoring this thing to the ground. There's literally anchor bolts that tie this thing all together.
It's metal, steel, and aluminum.
But we're not a structure. It defies, again, keep going back to it, right? It defies logic.
But Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ruled that it is. So we feel, as Pat said, confidence that we have the facts and the law on our side for the higher courts.
So what's you want to?
Okay.
I just opened the door. I was just like, "Hello, Rich. Let me get this for you."
The one thing I do want to say too, in terms of people saying like, "Oh, can you really make a difference? Like, can you really change it?" Well, yes, of course we believe we can, or we wouldn't still be doing this. But one thing is for certain: if Friends of Lackawanna and all the people committed to this, who are following this effort, supporting us, if we weren't here, it would have happened already. So
that's scary.
So we're making a difference. We are actively making a difference.
That's commendable and scary.
Yeah. And we are committed for as long as it takes because we love this area. That's it.
So do I. I came back here.
We're not making... And believe we're not making any money off this, right? Like
if you boiled it down,
passion, right?
If you boiled it down to time and material.
Oh, you don't. I can't even.
No thanks.
What is owed to you?
I can't even. I don't know. But we have a great legal team, so that's who we have to. That's who we have to pay. And they're excellent. I mean, we really, we're very fortunate to have the legal team on this. And there are a couple things happening at the same time. There's the zoning, which is under appeal because, big surprise, Dunmore didn't think it was a structure. Wow, that was we didn't see that.
I don't look. I don't.
Miles away.
I can. Are we radio personalities yet? Can I be the wacky whatever? All right. So for me, I don't want to. I'm sure they're all very nice people. But it was literally like, I thought I was watching like Barney Fife. Like I thought it was, I'm like, what am I watching? And, no one asked any relevant question. Nobody seemed to care. In my estimation, it seems like that whole board's mind was made up before anybody walked in the room, which scared me. Like I said, I think I have a pretty good bullshit radar.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of times, like I'm not the guy who's in the back of the room that goes, "Oh, come on." And I did it about 4 or 5 times in those meetings. And I'm supposed to remain like ambiguous on what you know what I mean? There was a couple of times where I was like, and that lawyer's slick, man. That lawyer from Philly, slick. But he's a self-professed, this is kind of like the first time I'm here. Yeah. And you're like, what? And that was one of like his opening statements. Yeah. I'm really not familiar with the town.
Yeah.
But you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just very hard to swallow and grasp. What do you think? I mean, what's the future look like for Friends of Lackawanna? Like what's the things coming up that people can at least be afraid of?
Or get involved
the outcomes or get involved.
Yeah, because don't forget that I think the big thing is like we really thanks to like the 400 people plus that showed up the other evening, like that made an impression that especially on the elected officials and on the DEP, the tides are turning, and so the biggest thing people can do, like we said, is to keep writing, but people should know what's happening and what's happening in the process right now. And I think Pat can speak to that.
Yeah. So as we've talked about a bunch during this podcast, there's really 3 separate issues going on in parallel right now. The first one is fighting the expansion. So that looks like it's there's some plans and some back and forth, as we mentioned earlier, May through end of summer as of now. There's some back and forth on that in terms of the environmental assessment. We're challenging, we have the appeal going on the zoning case right now that's actively going on as well. They're just starting to set some dates for that. So those dates will be set pretty soon in terms of oral arguments on that. The third issue we're doing right now is we're challenging them, ignore the 50 years. Based on the information we've already found, we're saying you need to shut this thing down now. So we're challenging their actual operations right now. So what happened is that DEP gave the landfill a 10-year extension last year and said you can keep operating for 10 more years based on it's a permit renewal.
It's different than the expansion.
Right. Under their existing permit, you can go for 10 more years. We're challenging that as well. And that's in front of what's called the Environmental Hearing Board in the state of Pennsylvania. And that's an independent judicial body that hears those cases. And we are now going through discovery in the deposition phases now.
Now the first 2 things, which is the second one was the zoning appeal. Mm-hmm. What was the first one?
The expansion challenge itself. Okay.
Now those, especially the appeal, mm-hmm. right? What court is that in? Where is that appeal heard? Where is that?
Sure. So the zoning appeal is being heard in Commonwealth Court. So Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court.
Local or away?
It'll be local.
Mm-hmm. Where?
In Lackawanna County.
Scary.
We'll see. Again,
now is that down at the courthouse or where's that?
Yeah, it'll be in the courthouse. Regular hearing.
Okay. And the opposition to the expansion is where does that get held?
The actual opposition to the...
You haven't had a hearing or anything on
No,
that
there's
yet.
no hearing. So there's nothing to challenge or appeal. Then we're just making our points now to win right now.
They haven't made a decision there yet.
So we're doing everything we can to actually have that decision come in our favor.
Right.
But even if it does, they have a right to appeal that, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So we have the operating permit appeal, we have the zoning appeal, and then right now they're actually looking at the expansion to say they're looking at the harms and benefit. And that's what we're trying to say, as we've said through this entire cast, that the harms grossly outweigh the benefits.
Is this possible to work its way up all the way to at least the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court?
We were told by some consultants of the landfill that they'll just take this to the Supreme Court if they have to. So we'll see what they want to do.
Are you guys willing to go the distance?
I think we've proven that. I think one of the absurdist points of view here is that the landfill acts as though they have an inherent right to this expansion. Like it's almost like it's not whether it's we have the right to this. No, that doesn't make any sense to us. So yeah, we're fighting this every chance and every step we can. We can continue to do so because we've been so fortunate with both financial support from donors, of course. Donate more, go to friendslackawanna.org, click on the donate tab. But as well, the populist change of voice and support has been super beneficial as well. There's only so much noise 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 people can make. But when you send hundreds of letters to DEP and you send hundreds and thousands of emails out to people telling the elected officials that you're not happy with it, that's what makes the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys have already done the legwork on the website too.
Right.
We're ready to roll.
Yeah, all you got to do is say that you sent it and you just send it right to your...
You should write what you really feel, like why you oppose it. It's not like a form letter.
Yeah.
But you can write in what you think, but when you click send, it'll go to to everybody who needs to get it,
mm-hmm.
right? So all the elected officials and the DEP, but it's your thoughts, right? It's like, it's how you feel. So that way it's not a form letter, right?
Yeah. It's I'm against this because ...
And
everyone
say
tells
why.
their own story.
And I think that is one huge way people can be involved. We can't say enough how important it is for them to write letters. Letters at least are lasting, but calls are really good too. And we have over 3,000 followers now on our Facebook page. Follow the Facebook page.
That we're brave enough to like it.
I'm telling you, you're in really good company now. You'd be surprised. People are coming out of the woodwork and just saying enough is enough. And like, our community is our community. We love it, and it doesn't deserve this, you know? And so watch on there, because there are a lot of like calls to action, and we're going to be having a lot of fundraisers, but the fundraisers are they're fun too. You know, we have a good time. It's a great group of people. One of the
There's no D. It's just fundraisers.
Fundraiser. Ooh, can we use
Michele
that?
will be using this now every single
can we use
day.
That? It's
There
a
you go.
fundraiser.
That was free, Michele.
I do love that. Good.
I'm a
thank you.
capitalist, but that was free.
Thank you for your contribution to the cause. Yeah, and you know, we said one of the silver linings to this is the friendships that have been forged. You know, and that's kind of a really special thing. You know, and they'll be there forever.
And this is something that crosses party lines too. I mean, as we get more and more political,
This is so
as the,
apolitical. It's not even
you know,
funny.
as the elections come up and everything, you know, people start to get divided and everything. But this is an issue that isn't liberal or conservative. You know, this affects everybody.
At the same time, though, I think, and this is just me speaking on behalf of me, you know, if there's elected officials, you know, elected officials are supposed to represent the people and what the people want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're supposed to be the extension of you, so that, you know, Dunmore, I believe, has 12,000 residents. Approximately.
14, yeah,
12 or 14.
somewhere in
So they have representatives so that 14,000 people don't show up in Harrisburg, you know, to try to vote
Right.
on bills and measures. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, you know, you have to pressure your local representatives, because if they're not representing the will of the people, they're not doing their job.
And it should be
Does that
said,
make sense? Like-
yeah, and it should be noted, and really noted by the elected officials, that there have been several candidates who lost their seats for not having an anti-expansion position.
They were for the landfill.
They were either for, or they said nothing.
So they either they
Just refuse to take a stance on it.
Yeah, because refusing to take a stance to me is the same as saying
Yeah,
it
you
for.
might as
There's
well
no
just
excuse
agree.
now, right? 18 months ago, maybe you could say, I got to learn more. If you're an elected official of this area and you're not well versed on this specific issue, you don't deserve your job.
Mm-hmm.
because this isn't
There's
just
nothing bigger.
Yeah, but this isn't just a Dunmore Troop thing.
No,
No.
This is
it's regional.
believe it or not, it's almost the entire county, if not more.
It's northeastern Pennsylvania. That's how we group it. It's the entire northeastern Pennsylvania. And if you are elected, as you said, Mark, to represent people of this area, and you don't have an informed decision on this issue, you do not deserve your seat. It's as simple as that. There is nothing bigger facing it that you can represent your people on than this issue. If your job is to build a future for tomorrow and you don't have an opinion on this, you don't deserve to be there.
Well, I mean, their argument, you know, I got to create jobs, whatever. This is going to take away so much industry. It's going to take so many jobs away. Even if somebody's coming in to make candles, they're going to be like, landfill, not making candles.
Well, listen, if you're coming in to see this area and you're being driven from the airport, you know, across the valley, you see
To Clark Summit.
You see two landfills. You see the ridge of our mountain on the one side with power lines the entire way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did that happen? Right? And now potentially you'll have power plants too. So I'm like, where is our respect for ourselves? Where is our respect for our environment? Where is our respect for, you know, our people? Did we not learn from the coal industry?
No.
You know, so, you know, this is our opportunity. Change starts with the first step, you know, and
It's the hardest step.
is the hardest step is the first one.
And it gets easier as you go.
And truly, this is our chance to say, that's it. We're not taking it. We're not going to take it anymore. Right. Like this is it. We have too much pride in ourselves. We love our area too much, and we believe in the future. If you don't believe in the future, then don't do anything. If you don't care about future generations, then don't do anything. You know, if
you don't care about your kids, you don't care about your
kids,
grandkids,
or
if you don't care about your job.
yeah, if you could care less about, you know, how this place will financially do, or, you know, what the health is going to be like, then don't just sit on your hands. We don't care. But if you care at all, like, now is the time, really right now, to get involved, especially on this issue, because I think it all starts here.
I applaud everything that you guys are doing. And I think, you know, you guys had the guts to stand out in front of it, and in a strange, you know, in a realistic way that I think people listening to this can understand, is like, you put your reputation on the line. You put your livelihood on the line.
You know, we hear that. Thank you. First, second, for speaking for myself, and once you do a little bit of reading on it, it's actually really easy.
And
Once you read and learn about this issue.
You mean it's easy to make the first step?
Yeah, no, you feel guilty not getting it. I mean, how could you live in this area and learn about this and be silent? That's, there's everyone can't get involved. There are business ties and stuff, we understand that. But you can silently get involved as well. We appreciate everything, the kind words that everyone has to say about, thanks for being the public. Michele and I, for better, as I joke, for better and for worse. We oftentimes are the voices of this thing. But there's so many people helping.
So many.
Now, as far as donations, like people can give anonymously. They can give.
Sure.
Go back to that website, baby.
Yeah. There's lots of information.
friendsoflackawanna.org.
Yeah. And that's the thing here. Like there are so many people who support what we're doing, even if they can't say so loudly. So it's like, I'm afraid to come out because it might hurt me professionally or my whatever. There are so many people who've got your back. There's so many more people who've got your back and are happy that you're doing this, are proud of what you're doing, than there are people who want to hurt you for speaking out.
Well, I'm gonna come out, and I'm not gonna use Senator Casey's line because he used the Constitution as justification. I'm gonna use morality. I think it's wrong. Yeah. I think what they're doing up there is wrong. I think I'm not against capitalism. I'm against capitalism when it hurts people.
Yes, that's it.
And exactly. I think anybody should make as much money as they want as long as they don't hurt anybody.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. And
that's at the end of the day where I stand.
Yeah.
So come at me, pro landfill people. Right. I'll just make videos.
Yeah. Personally, I'd just love to see the arguments.
Yeah.
What are they going to say?
Do you really? Yeah. Oh, man. I'm sure I'd find something to say. It's not going to be nice. My mom's from West Side.
Yeah. And
so shit gets real quick.
The other thing that Friends of Lackawanna is sort of doing on a bigger picture, like this is a local issue, but we understand that there are issues with the process and the regulations too. And we're willing to participate in that change, in reduce, reuse, recycle, in, how do we create better laws around this? But like as Pat said, there will be no incentive to change as long as expansions keep getting allowed. You can't get to the next step if you keep allowing expansions and a cheap way to dispose of the garbage. Then there's never going to be incentive to eliminate or reduce the waste stream or find better ways.
Well, it's one of those things like, forget the landfill, lose the landfill. You live in Dunmore, right?
Yeah.
Your neighbor starts parking old cars in the yard and not cutting their grass, and there's just like an eyesore or blight or whatever.
Yeah.
That's going to reduce your property value. Just even that.
It is such a blight right now. When you look again, just go to.
I'm just trying to give perspective on
totally.
Okay, forget the landfill. Yeah. What about your next door neighbor who's literally expanding?
Right.
The crap next to your house. You're not gonna willingly just sit there and be like, it's just Sean.
Yeah,
likes junk.
He likes junk.
No, Sean, you're an asshole.
Yeah, right?
Stop doing that.
Yeah, and you can't as of right now. I think they've got some sort of a thing going on over our lines, but right now, like you can't even grow trees on that. Like, so that's what you're going to see when you talk about the aesthetics and our natural resources are one of the biggest assets to our region. And that's why the power lines make me so mad. And that's why looking over that tremendous, cancerous
mountain
eyesore, that bald spot on the side of the mountain's like, it just, I find it painful, it's painful. And but it can get worse. Trust me, it can get a lot worse. So let's stop it.
Well, if everything goes the way, the other side thinks it's going to go, it's going to get worse.
We keep telling areas like Allentown that also have two landfills in close proximity to each other, like we do. We keep telling them, we are your ghosts of Christmas future. You don't even know how bad it can get. And, and we need to stop this now. And the only way that happens is if everybody who's listening to this gets involved and write the letters, come get on our Facebook page, come to our fundraisers, hang out with us, help us. There's a lot of times we need help passing out flyers or, canvassing. Like this is the marathon and it's not over and we're going to need more help. So, and we've only gotten to where we are because of the people who, who have supported us.
And you got a great group of people.
We do.
So Facebook.com/Friends of Lackawanna.
Yep.
friendsoflackawanna.org.
Yep.
You can donate there, get any information that at least you guys have.
Yeah.
We take anonymous donations as well. There's mailing addresses on there. Take money orders. You do whatever you want. We've had a bunch of people take advantage of that already for a lot of the reasons we've talked about tonight.
Yeah.
So you can do anonymous donations as well.
Parting words?
Well, we appreciate you coming on and getting in depth in this issue and talking about it in a way that I think anybody could understand and want to get involved. It like you said before, it makes your blood boil.
Yeah.
The more that you think about it, and the more facts that get laid out in front of you, it doesn't make any sense to do anything else but fight it.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk about it. And again, sometimes at this point sound a little laid back about it. But what I really want to do, like I said, is scream.
Sure.
And really, I want to scream and just, and run from house to house and shake people and be like, your children,
Yep.
This is bad. It is bad. But you can't stay that. We've got to get the job done too. Right.
Sure.
And I think that, having opportunities like this helps spread the word, and we really appreciate it.
If I may, I believe that there's more good in the world than bad.
Me too.
I think that you guys are doing something good.
Yeah.
I think, I think you guys are the true embodiment of Batman and or Superman. So, can I make a deal with you?
Sure.
If we can all get together and protect our assets, our community, and stop this thing,
Yeah.
will you guys dress up like superheroes?
Sure. We have to be Green Lantern though. I mean,
You could be whoever you want. I don't even care if
green.
you're Aquaman, Pat. You could be.
I want to be Firestar.
Well,
do you remember the Spidey friends?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Spider-Man and his amazing
I don't
friends.
know if I can pull off that spandex suit, but whatever.
Huh? Dude, you could
Need
be
red
fine.
hair.
We'll all dress up.
Right.
I think, honestly, I think we deserve it.
Right.
No, well, you guys, not we.
That
I'm
could
just
be-
looking for a reason to dress
It could
up.
be a good fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
Like a
You're your best
fundraiser.
Yeah.
I like where this is going. The fundraiser.
Fundraiser.
Right.
Pat, did I create a monster?
no, she's already
It's
there.
it's a super fundraiser. I just ignored that. And
A
kept
super
going.
fundraiser. That's wonderful. I think you guys are awesome. Everybody who
you're
listens to this, please go check out Facebook.com/Friends of Lackawanna. Go to friendsoflackawanna.org. Give, educate yourselves. Don't stand idly by. Be on the right side of history, because I think this is a horrible, horrible thing. And the facts are out there. You can make an educated decision for yourself. Nobody's telling you which way to think, even though we're attempting to. But go out and find it out for yourself, because the truth doesn't lie. Water's wet, the sky's blue, the landfill's bad.
Amen.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks so much.